the strategy in Africa for the aviation sector should be collaboration, not individually launching airlines or trying to run it in a globally competitive industry. And as you mentioned, there's a new alliance, at least that's been rumored, that's been discussed, or actually been confirmed by some of the participants, that 4 major carriers in Africa are forming an alliance. And what was surprising, actually, is that they excluded the biggest and the most successful airline in Africa from that alliance. As you're aware, in Europe, for example, there's only 3 major carrier groups, one formed by Lufthansa, another one formed by Iberia and British Airways, and the third one is the Air France-KLM alliance. So if you consider that as a model, I was a bit surprised, and I actually tweeted about it when I heard about this, that why would they exclude Ethiopian Airlines? Because it's the most profitable airline. It's surprisingly, all 4 of them are actually financially challenged airlines. So they could have learned a lot from Ethiopian Airlines, which made more money than all African airlines combined for 4 years in a row. So if the intention is to be competitive, I think excluding Ethiopian Airlines, in my view, was a mistake. At least that's what the news releases imply. I'm not sure if that was really hyped by the media or if that was their real intention. If it is, then they're mistaken. They should include it. Now, I do want to emphasize one thing here, though. We've done on my team, I've done virtually every airline transaction advisory in Africa over the last 15 years. So one of the things I have been advocating is collaboration. So the collaboration aspect of it is good. But look at it this way. The competition is not Ethiopian Airlines. The competition is the non-African carriers. 80% of air transport into and out of Africa is controlled by non-African carriers. 80%. So I think my view and my recommendation is they need to focus on the likes of the Gulf carriers, the likes of the European carriers, who are actually taking, and carriers like Emirates, Qatar Airways, Turkish Airways, Lufthansa, all these that are really taking the bulk of the business, but not Ethiopian Airlines. So I think they need to refocus that.
Mr. Negatu, of course, the 4 here in question, again, these are unconfirmed reports, are South African Airways, Kenya Airways, Rwandair, and of course, Mauritius Air. These are unconfirmed reports, but is this the classic success conundrum? Ethiopian Airways is profitable. Just last year, it bagged over $130 million in profits alone, not just revenue. Is this a success conundrum?
Well, again, regardless whether, I mean, you're absolutely, by the way, I just wanted to correct something. Ethiopian Airlines made more than $230 million. I think you left $100 million on the table there. Still, it's a very significant sum of money. They should learn from the success of Ethiopian Airlines. The challenge we've seen every time we go restructure an airline in Africa is the big challenge is governance. Okay? They're not managed like businesses. They're seen as a state's patronage, job assignment, locations. So they need to change the governance structure. A lot of the things that are hindering them, it's not Ethiopian Airlines hindering their growth. It's their own governments, their own local operating markets, and all of them with egos who want to have their flags flown to Heathrow when they should realize these are businesses. A single big 777 could cost 200 million plus to buy. That means it's very expensive equipment. So that means they need to be run as businesses and not target. And the second part, not target the like successful airlines. Like they should learn. I was at the inauguration of the biggest airport in Africa last week, which is Bole International Airport in Addis. It's going to be handling 22 million passengers. That airport, the existing was open only 10, 12 years ago. It can only handle 6 to 8 million. So it's already a stretch. So they should have come to Ethiopia and say, what is it that you guys are doing right? Can we learn with you? Can we be in alliance with you? Because our competition is not you. I think they need to have that mindset. Anyways, so the issues are governance. I think they need to focus on the governance issue. They also need to focus on what are the infrastructure challenges. If you don't have effective airports, you can't run a successful airline. If you intend to fly around the world just for the sake of flying your flags, then you're mistaken. It's not as I said, it's not a way to egoize the people who run these airlines. They lose money. As I said, if you want to be successful, learn from the best. Why is it that all 4 of them are losing money and they're coming together? By adding up all big losses together doesn't make you profitable. And I think that's been my recommendation to all of them. We know all the airlines, they're in good intention, but if you look at South African Airways, it's had 7 CEOs, I think, in the last 10 years. You can't run an airline successfully with that kind of turnover. Kenya Airways has been losing money for 5 years in a row. I think the government of Kenya should ask, is the model right? Air Mauritius apparently has been losing. And so all of them, I think they need to change their model.
Mr. Negatu, very briefly before I let you go, if I am Michael Joseph and I am at the helm of Kenya Airways, my biggest problem here might be if I go into a coalition with a successful Ethiopian Airways, it is going to be calling the shots because they're going to tell you, this has worked. You will relinquish your airline. Now, do you get the sense that this was actually the problem and that's why they were afraid of a successful Ethiopian Airways going into this particular merger?
If that is the way they're thinking, they're misguided, they're wrong. Here's my thinking. Keep this in mind as we discuss consolidation and partnership in Africa. 80% of air traffic in Africa is controlled by non-African airlines. It's not Ethiopian Airlines that's controlling 80%. Okay, so Michael Joseph and the others who run South African Airways and Mauritius should just sit down with the CEO of Ethiopian Airlines and say, how can we work with you? How can we share costs? Ethiopian, for example, has the biggest maintenance shop in Africa by far. They have the biggest aviation academy. Why should they all replicate that? In the United States, where I grew up, where I do operate, the airline industry has been consolidated to just 5 major carriers. And that's a multi-billion-dollar industry right there in the United States. The domestic market alone is hugely, infinitely bigger than Africa. So if we're trying to, in fact, what these 4 should do and combine Ethiopia is talk about opening up, having a free airline travel market in Africa. Okay, these bilateral agreements are designed to hinder growth, to hinder success. And the consumers in Africa, the airfares in Africa are some of the highest in the world because of lack of competition. So I think these will be what I think they need to guide governance, as I said, a business model that says airline is a business, not something that a minister or a president of an African country say, oh, yeah, I do have an airline. No, that's not the model. And also improve the infrastructure. The airports in Africa, but if you saw the airport in Addis last week, you'll be impressed. As an African, you'll be very proud because it's as good as anything you find in the United States, in Europe, or even in Asia, where they have beautiful airports. You rarely find that. If you don't have that kind of infrastructure, no matter how much alliance you create, the passenger is not going to pass through your airport because they have services they can find somewhere else. And pricing. If you keep gouging your customers because there's no competition, pretty soon they'll flee to someone else. So the alliance has to be focused on those kinds of real issues.
Mr. Negatu, we'll definitely be revisiting this particular conversation. Amazing insights indeed.